We're doing these interviews on MediaChannel.org to try to speak to the people who know about the media, who are consumers of the media and makers of media. We've had Rick Wolff, the economist, on to talk about these issues, and we just got going. It was time to end the segment. So we're going back to him for a second segment to hear more about the media and how we could transform it. Rick Wolff on MediaChannel.org. But sometimes what you see is not really what's going on, okay? I mean, you can listen to debates on television or read the newspaper, but what you call structural problems often don't come to public attention. What are they, and how can people understand how the structure of institutions affects the choices that we have?
I think you have to force, through channels like yours, through agencies like mine, that the topics not being discussed are brought onto the center of the stage. Let me give you one example. The biggest event shaping the American economy in the last 30 years is probably not well understood by most people. It has to do with something that happened in the 1970s. In the 70s, new technologies were developed, the jet engine as a general way of traveling, the internet, telecommunications, all of that. One of the effects of that breakthrough was to give capitalist enterprises in Europe, Japan, and North America an opportunity they had never had before. And the best way to put it is this way. They could now monitor, control, check an enterprise 10,000 miles away as easily as one 10 miles away.
And what happened to working people while this was going on?
Well, the thing that the corporations did is they looked at their facilities in Europe, North America, and Japan and said, look, we've had a 200-year run of capitalism in these parts of the world, or 100 years at least. We fought with our workers. They won decent wages and working conditions, at least in North America, Western Europe, and Japan. But now, with the development of the new technology, why are we producing where we have to pay high wages? We're leaving. We're going to tell the people in North America, Western Europe, and Japan, either you let us drop your wages to nothing or we're out of here.
So you're saying basically that the American working people have not had a raise since the 1970s.
If you look at the statistics of the United States government, I'm not taking it from anywhere else, the real wage, that is, when you adjust the money you get in your weekly envelope for the prices you have to pay for what you buy, the real wage in economics is the same in 2013 that it was in the late 70s.
But you're the one that's talking about this. The media doesn't seem to be talking about it at all.
Very rarely, because it's not the good news. And they are proponents of capitalism. They are cheerleaders. They are boosters. They are not interested in the other information. It's only the anger and resentment of the people mounting over the last 5 years that has even created the opening for some of us.
Now, speaking of the good news, every month there are these job figures that come out. I know that you and your son Max often analyze these figures, and they come out and they always seem to show things are great, but they never ask the question compared to what it should be and what have you, and then a set of corrections come out. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, first of all, every month's estimates are preliminary estimates by the statisticians because they have to go back and double check this. That's why every month, in addition to announcing, for example, the unemployment rate for this month, they announce the corrected ones for the earlier month. This last month is a wonderful example. They said last month something that was tens of thousands of more employed people than the truth was, and they had to adjust it. But that's a footnote to the press conference. Most of the press conference is about the good news. Let me give it to you in a simple way. Before this crisis hit in the United States, the average unemployment rate in the year 2007, the last full year before the crisis really hit, was a little under 5%, 4.8. Okay? In the worst of the crisis, 2009 and 10, it hit 10%. Today, it's about 7.5%. That's not a recovery. That's not halfway back to where you were before the crisis.
And yet it's pictured as a recovery. And of course, they don't talk about unemployment among young people, among minorities, and the like.
Very rarely. That's
where
right.
you actually have a depression going on, not simply a recession.
Here's a statistic that I use to illustrate what's going on. The unemployment rate went to 10%, then it came back down to 7.5%. But if you superimpose on that picture the question, what happened to people who need food stamps? Food stamp program now called the SNAP program. It shows a line that keeps going straight up. We are worse in 2013 than in 2012. That was worse than 2011, and so on. So if you look at a statistic that really measures something, you will discover that 1/4 of the American people are now needing supplemental help just to eat enough. It's a much more realistic grasp.
So what's keeping all this going? Is it the money from the Federal Reserve Bank that seems to spend most of its time printing money and keeping interest rates very low for business?
Right. In our society, we have had a stunning series since the 1970s, when American businesses began to move out of the country to get more profits by paying workers less and elsewhere. We've had a problem. How do you keep this economy going when the capitalists, to whom we give the freedom to make that move, no matter what the social consequences? And for people who are wondering, go to Detroit. There you will see the consequences of factories when they leave. A city that went from 1.8 million people in 1960 to 700,000 today, throwing out more than half its people onto the slag heap of American history. It's a stunning story. But how did you prevent that kind of thing from happening everywhere? And the answer is one word: debt. American companies started borrowing money to keep the system going. The American people borrowed more money than any working class in the history of the world. Mortgage debt, credit card debt, auto payment debt, and now the big one, student debt.
You know, when I made a film about this, In Debt We Trust, in 2006, and I was projecting the possible, market collapse, it was called a doom and gloomer. I was called an alarmist. I knew what I was talking about. And then when it sort of happened, suddenly I went from being a zero to a hero. You're a genius. Well, of course, I wasn't a genius, but the point is that so few people were actually even talking about it.
And some people who said it have become famous for it, unlike you and me. Nouriel Roubini, a professor of business at the Stern School at NYU, was also a doom and gloomer beforehand and routinely pushed aside. He now commands, $50,000, $100,000 for a 10-minute speech someplace because he's become the retroactive genius. But when the debt exploded in 2007 and 8, that had kept us going from the 70s to 2007, a new propping up of the system, not debt anymore, and that's the Federal Reserve, flooding the economy with money to try to keep it from going. People should understand the American economy, and it's what I've been studying and teaching all my life, is held up, propped up by a vast effort of hysterically panic-driven anxiety about where it goes. One statistic: 90% of all the home mortgages written in the United States in the last 5 years are either owned or guaranteed by the government. If the government wasn't propping up the mortgage industry, the value of the home of everyone watching this program in the United States would be half what it is today. Anyone who criticizes the government is unaware of the dependence of every one of us on this government support.
So when Bernanke, the head of the Federal Reserve Bank, says he's going to ease up on his easing up,
everybody freaks out.
There's a total panic. Right. Now we're debating whether or not Bernanke should be replaced by Larry Summers, who helped give us, the great bailout, or Janet Yellen, who's another Federal Reserve governor. Does it really make a difference? Aren't they both driven by the same imperative to try to keep something that is collapsing from collapsing? That's
right. Their job is to, in the face of an economy in deep trouble, in the face of a Congress terribly divided, dysfunctional, that all that's left is to keep the system going. But the great fear, and this will be a problem whether it's Summers or Yellen or anybody else, and if I could make a comment, that the President of the United States would seriously consider a man for office who has said and done the things Mr. Summers has, gives you an idea. It's like making Tim Geithner a junior partner to the collapse, the new Secretary of the Treasury. It's a stunning declaration that those in power are determined to stay there no matter what they do.
And they don't seem to have a clue. Now you do. At the same time, we're in a media environment, okay, where I just read a story. Miley, the singer, is much more popular than any news about Syria. That actually, a lot of this news is playing to a very small audience. I mean, Obama has been using the networks like an accordion to try to get support for the Syria adventure, and yet people don't want it. They seem to be rejecting it. So does the media have as much impact as it thinks it has?
No, I think it is illusory. When everything's going pretty well, they play their role. When a crisis comes, the people who pull the strings get them to do it. But what's becoming clear is more and more it is losing people. I like to tell a story about what I think happening in the United States that is actually taken from the final days and weeks of the Soviet Union. At a certain point, Russian citizens began to look at the news that they were fed as follows. Whatever they saw or heard, they assumed the truth was the opposite. We are now at that place in the United States that they were then. And if people paid attention, they'd worry about that parallel.
And that's why, we have a media channel, mediachannel.org, because we're trying to say that what is in the media and what is not in the media is very central to your life. You have to understand media. You can learn how to tweet. You can learn how to make a video. You can, hang out with Google. You can, pop stuff up on YouTube. But if we don't change the structure of our media system, if we don't allow real information in, we're just sort of like Nero, fiddling away.
For me, the logical inference that comes from what you just said is that we should long ago have recognized that a minimum commitment to democracy means that something as important as the media should be a democratic possession of the society and not a private property. It is unthinkable. I mean, we wouldn't allow the military to be owned by an individual because we can understand what that would mean. But owning the media is the same. So what's the answer? Media should be a collective activity. Lots of people can and should be involved. Together, let the larger groups in society make their demands on what media should cover and what range of positions it should have. That would be a much better way to make media serve the people than allowing it to be owned by people who are determined to make it serve their interests.
Unfortunately, freedom of the press has been interpreted as freedom for people who own the press and not the rest of us. And your raising these questions is very important. Thanks so much for being on with us on mediachannel.org. R.D. Wolff, you've got to check out his website. You've got to read his books. It's very important, and I hope you'll continue to join us in this effort to try to make the media responsive to our democracy and to the needs of our society.
And I think we need to transform the media if we want them to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.